My wife lived a secret swinger club double life and tried to frame me. So I gathered evidence, exposed her in court, took revenge, and won the divorce. I never imagined I would stand in the middle of my own living room, trembling, with a folder of incriminating photos clutched between my sweaty fingers. In one night, my entire life had unraveled. A few hours earlier, I had been consumed by a sense of dull unease, but it was nowhere near the fury and disgust boiling inside me as I realized what I was holding in my hands. I was supposed to be a loving husband. I had known Jennifer ever since we were wide-eyed teenagers in high school. We'd been married for 9 years. We had lived through the typical ups and downs, big relocations, student debt, career misfires, and arguments over whose turn it was to fold laundry. All of it. We grew older, always side by side, tackling challenges like a unified front. Sure, I wasn't perfect, but I genuinely thought of myself as one of the good guys, steady, dependable, there for her no matter what. Even as the years passed, and we faced the possible foreclosure of our home, I always tried to be the rock, the stable one who refused to let everything collapse. But the moment I flipped through those pictures, every comforting notion I had about my wife, my marriage, and my own decency shattered with a loud crack in my head. The man I was turning into, ruthless, furious, vengeful, terrified me. Yet the sense of betrayal in my chest was far stronger than any guilt I felt at the ugliness I was about to unleash. I'd just come off a case at the small law firm where I now worked, my head pounding from a day of reading contracts for some local nonprofit. My job wasn't glamorous. I specialized in small-scale disputes in contract law, that sort of thing. But I was proud of it. I helped real people, not faceless corporations. I tried to keep my moral compass intact. That was the day I found a plain, unmarked envelope waiting for me in my top desk drawer. It was the oddest thing. There was no name on the outside, just my first initial scribbled in pen, as though someone had broken in or gotten special permission from the office staff to leave it there. I opened it, and my insides twisted with confusion and revulsion. There were nearly a dozen photographs, each a little blurrier than the last but still perfectly recognizable. They were images of Jennifer wearing what looked like latex or leather, kneeling on a small stage in front of multiple customers in a dimly lit, upscale venue that looked more like a high-end fetish lounge than a run-of-the-mill strip club. In some photos, she was with older couples, 2 couples, possibly more. Another showed her with her arms behind her back in an apparent demonstration of subservience, glaring neon lights flashing around them. The photographs got progressively stranger, her face contorted in an almost manic grin, with some sort of grotesque revelry reflecting in her eyes. None of this was simply dancing or regular stripping. This was the domain of a swingers club, replete with bizarre performances for private guests. Even with my brain screaming that it might be a trick or a setup, I recognized her. The posture, the tilt of her head, the shape of her body, the jawline. It was my wife. The dates printed at the edge of the photos indicated these images were very recent, 2 weeks prior, 5 days prior, even the same week. So many emotions pummeled me at once. Confusion, betrayal, a twisted sense of awe that she could keep something of this magnitude hidden, and a spike of unfiltered rage. There was no neat, tidy way to process it. For a moment, I just stood by my desk, scanning these pictures repeatedly as if hoping they might transform into something else. My vision literally darkened at the edges from the anger surging inside me. I stuffed the pictures back into the envelope, locked it in my desk, and tried to steady my breathing. I had to confirm if this was real. And part of me wanted to gather all the evidence in the world so there could be no chance of her wriggling out of it. Within the hour, I had placed a call to a private investigator I had used in a past case. It was expensive, yes, but I had to know the truth. A single set of photos might be forged, or so I told myself in the vain hope I was still some naive guy. But my gut told me differently. If those pictures were real, Jennifer was living a life I had never suspected in my wildest nightmares. That very evening, I returned home, my mind still blazing. Jennifer wasn't around. A note in the kitchen indicated she'd gone shopping and would be back late. No specifics, no explanation. Typical. For the last few months, she had grown increasingly vague about her whereabouts and started wearing bras and underwear that cost more than our monthly groceries. I had asked questions, but she waved them off with charming smiles or quick deflections. Now I wondered if every piece of lingerie was for these strangers at that club. Who knew how many of them touched what she wore for me? It made my skin crawl with revulsion. I passed a tortured night, flipping between sleeplessness and delirium. When my phone finally rang the next morning, it was the private investigator. He asked me to meet him in a parking lot near an old diner on the outskirts of town. That was where I would receive definitive proof, he said. I drove with both hands white-knuckled around the steering wheel. At the diner, I found him seated in a booth, a small folder in front of him. I slid into the seat across from him. Without ceremony, he handed me the folder and said, "I'm sorry." Inside were additional photographs, some in high-resolution color, of Jennifer strutting around a large lavish hall dominated by strobe lights and a central stage. The sign outside read, "Members Only, Weekend Night of Surprises." More photos showed Jennifer leaving with wads of cash stuffed into a small satchel, Jennifer hugging and kissing older customers, Jennifer in a full latex bodysuit that left only her eyes and mouth exposed, and, worst of all, her standing in the middle of the stage, wrists chained, performing some elaborate, humiliating routine, while onlookers cheered. The images were explicit enough that I had to force my eyes to keep looking. Where is this?" I rasped. "An exclusive swingers club," the private investigator replied quietly. "They host private parties for affluent members. Apparently, she's been going a couple of nights a week for months." My stomach churned. She had told me she had acting roles or extra gigs. All the while, she was doing that for money, or maybe even for fun. I stared at the swirl of cheap diner coffee in front of me, suppressing the urge to flip the table in a rage. "Send me everything you have," I said. "Every photo, every timestamp. I need it all." He nodded grimly. "I'm sorry it turned out this way. It wasn't enough for me to have the photos." A part of me, some savage, primal urge, wanted to confront her in the moment, to see with my own eyes what she was doing, and yes, perhaps to punish her somehow for making a fool of me. I was seething, but I couldn't tip her off. So, I told her I had an overnight assignment and wouldn't be home. In reality, I arranged to enter that secret club as a paying customer. The cost of admission was outrageously high, but I had enough in my account, and I didn't care if I had to drain every penny just to step inside that vile place. On the designated night, a Friday, I showed up at an unmarked building in a secluded area behind a row of abandoned warehouses. My heart hammered. A line of masked individuals stood by a tall, muscular bouncer who checked membership cards. The private investigator had provided me with a method to bribe my way in. Sure enough, after I slipped the bouncer some cash discreetly, he let me through. I entered a lavish, dimly lit lounge with plush chairs arranged around small tables. In the center was a stage encircled by a catwalk. The entire place reeked of expensive perfume, leather, and a faint note of sweat. My senses were on overload. Laughter, moans, and the clinks of champagne glasses reverberated across the walls. They handed me a black and silver mask at the entrance. I had already donned a dark suit to blend in with the upper-crust clientele that apparently frequented this place. Trying to remain calm, I navigated the crowd and slipped into a seat near the stage, every nerve in my body on fire. Couples of various ages were scattered about. Some were in their 50s or 60s, dressed in extravagant evening wear, gazing hungrily at the stage. A hush fell over the audience as the lights shifted to a lurid purple, highlighting the catwalk. That was when my wife stepped out, wearing an impossibly tight latex suit that glistened under the overhead spots. Her face was partly concealed by a black half mask, but her eyes were visible, and I recognized them with painful clarity. My heart pounded so violently I was sure the entire table must be shaking. She was accompanied by two men wearing theatrical hoods, leading her on a kind of leash. The watchers around me whispered excitedly. Some clapped, others just stared with parted lips. Jennifer, or whatever stage name she was using, strolled down the catwalk in her latex outfit, carrying herself with brazen confidence. She reached the stage at the center. There, she knelt gracefully, like she had done this routine hundreds of times. An older couple, possibly in their 60s, beckoned her closer. She crawled on her hands and knees. My entire body was taut, fists clenched so hard they hurt. The sight was grotesque. She was effectively performing subservient acts in front of them, arching her back, pressing her gloved hands to the floor as if begging. The older woman in the couple handed her some sort of prop, a phallic toy it seemed, while the older man laughed. The crowd's murmurs grew more frenzied. Jennifer placed the toy between her teeth, arching her spine in an overtly provocative manner. It was a scene so twisted and cringe-inducing that my mind struggled to keep up. Then the men in hoods circled her, offering an even more demeaning demonstration for the onlookers. At times, she turned her face toward them, performing what was clearly a choreographed show that teased at the edges of decency, or perhaps well beyond the edge. I felt physically ill, my stomach lurching. Yet I couldn't move. I was rooted to that seat, the mask hot against my face, my blood roaring in my ears. Minutes ticked by, each more agonizing than the last. She shifted to a new routine on her knees, performing bizarre pantomimes that involved letting the older couple place money in her latex bodysuit's little pockets or cleavage. She laughed like it was the most exhilarating moment of her life, and the crowd applauded. I couldn't take it anymore. Something inside me snapped so abruptly that I nearly blacked out from fury. I rose from my seat, pressing through the throng of viewers. My vision was tinted red with hatred and heartbreak, so intense it felt like I was floating. When I reached the edge of the stage, I tore off my mask, flinging it aside in a dramatic gesture that instantly drew attention. "Jennifer!" My voice boomed. She halted mid-act and turned sharply. The entire crowd seemed to gasp in unison. Her eyes widened in shock, the half-mask failing to hide her recognition. She scrambled to her feet, confusion swirling with absolute horror. "What? What are you doing here?" she sputtered, raising one latex-clad arm as if to shield herself. The bright spotlights illuminated the trembling around her lips. It was too late. My vision tunneled. I shouted, my voice echoing over the hush that had fallen on the crowd. "What do you think I'm doing here? I got your pictures. I got the videos, too. What is this? Huh? Is this how you repay me for everything we built together?" She tried to regain her composure, her chin lifting in a defiant stance. "You have no right to be here," she snapped. Her words cracked with the beginnings of panic, yet there was an undercurrent of arrogance too, as if I were the one intruding on her territory. "You're violating my privacy. This is my job. I don't need your permission." Fury nearly swallowed my voice. "You disgust me," I snarled. "I gave you everything, love, a home, loyalty. You repay me by crawling around for these decrepit old—" "Shut up!" she shrieked, stepping forward, pointing at me with a trembling latex finger. "Don't you dare come here and embarrass me like this. How could you do this, spying on me, showing up unannounced? You're stalking your own wife." I barked out a mirthless laugh. "My wife? The same woman rolling around for randoms at a swingers club? That's some line in the sand you've drawn." She glanced around, realizing the entire club was now watching. Her bravado crumbled, replaced with fury and humiliation. She stomped one foot on the stage, standing as if she had the moral high ground. "This is my life. You have no say in what I do. I told you I needed space. If you try to drag me out of here, I'll call the police." My own rage peaked. I jumped onto the low platform, ignoring the gasps and the men in hoods who started stepping in to intervene. "You're coming home now," I thundered, grabbing her wrist. She pulled back violently. "Get your hands off me," she shouted, her voice echoing in the hush. "If you touch me again, I'll scream so loud the cops will arrest you for assault. This is private property. You have no right." Everything happened in seconds. A pair of massive bouncers, bodyguards, more like, descended upon me, tackling me from behind. My face hit the stage floor with a brutal smack, the metallic taste of blood flooding my mouth. I kicked and spat, but they twisted my arms behind my back, cuffing me with plastic zip ties. The crowd parted, some onlookers giggling with condescension, others whispering in shock. Jennifer stood over me, panting with adrenaline, her face contorted in a mix of hysteria and triumph. "I warned you," she hissed. "You can't just barge in and ruin my show. You're out of your mind." I choked out, my lips stinging from the impact. "Wait until I—" She cut me off by turning her back, signaling the bouncers to remove me. They hauled me to the exit, half dragging me while I struggled. I heard jeers from some of the high-paying customers, as if I were trash they'd happily see kicked to the gutter. The next moment I was shoved through the doors, landing hard on the pavement outside. A few seconds later, one bouncer snipped the plastic ties and kicked me square in the ribs for good measure. They left me coughing, my face burning with humiliation and rage. I lay there for what felt like ages before I staggered to my feet. My mind was a storm of thoughts. She had threatened me, humiliated me, treated me like a trespasser. This was the woman who once told me I was her soulmate, who talked about raising a family, traveling to Europe again, living happily ever after. Looking back, the anger that coiled itself around my heart that night never really left. It only solidified into something black and merciless. I returned home, blood still trickling from my split lip, the humiliating scene replaying endlessly in my mind. Sometime around 2 o'clock in the morning, I slumped onto our living room couch. I didn't sleep, only watched the hours tick by on the digital clock. Jennifer did not come home that night, nor the next day, nor the one after. On the 4th day, I took a half-day off work and saw a locksmith. I had every single lock on the doors changed. If she wanted to come crawling back, it wouldn't be on her terms. Sure enough, early that evening, I heard the jangle of keys at the front door, then a frustrated rattling, a pounding, and finally her voice. "Open up! I know you're in there!" I took my sweet time getting to the door. I opened it just wide enough to glare at her. She stood on the stoop, arms folded, her hair disheveled. A A spark of anger lit her features the moment she realized she wasn't stepping inside freely. "You changed the locks?" she asked, sounding outraged, as though I were the one out of line. "Yes," I said coldly. "I don't want you here." She tried to push past, but I planted a hand on the doorframe. "You can't do this," she yelled. "It's my house too." "Not for long it isn't," I snapped back. "You lost your say when you threatened me in that cesspit of a club. You made your choice." She glared furiously, fists clenched at her sides. Then her expression shifted to something more cunning. "Fine, you don't want to let me in, we'll see what the police have to say about this. I'll have you arrested for spousal abuse." I leaned in with a sneer, letting the darkness of my own rage show. "Try it. The bodyguards already roughed me up pretty good on your command. I have pictures of my injuries, doctor's notes, everything. So, go ahead. You'll end up behind bars for assault and battery with your darling club buddies." "You," she sputtered, eyes wide with hate. "Do you think I can't fight back legally? We'll see about that." I slammed the door in her face. She pounded for another few minutes, hurling obscenities, then stormed off to her car. I watched from the living room window until her taillights disappeared down the street. My breathing was shaky. Part of me felt sick. I never thought I'd bar my own wife from the house, but there was no going back. She'd made that clear. A day later, I learned she was staying at her mother's place. This was confirmed by a passing neighbor who had seen her throwing suitcases into her trunk and speeding away. Good riddance, I told myself, though a hollow ache lingered in my chest. The house was oddly quiet without her. For 9 years, her presence, for better or worse, had been woven into the fabric of my days. Now I paced empty rooms, half expecting her to appear with some mocking grin or haughty remark about my privacy violation. But I had no time to indulge in sentimentality. I needed to move fast. She had threatened legal action, and she was cunning enough to follow through. I had to speak to a lawyer, not just rely on my own knowledge. I specialized in contracts, not messy divorces. I scheduled an appointment with a divorce attorney recommended by a colleague. Before I left, I gathered every scrap of evidence, photos, the private investigator's files, the text messages from her that reeked of arrogance, threatening me with serious consequences if I ruined her career. As I was locking up the house, my phone buzzed. An unknown number flashed on the screen. I nearly ignored it, but something made me pick up. "Hello, is this Jennifer's husband?" a woman's voice asked. My pulse quickened. "Who's asking?" "It's Nancy," the woman replied. "We worked together at the club. She once introduced me to some of your pictures. She carried them in her phone and I recognized your face when you stormed in. I need to see you." I paused, knuckles whitening around my phone. "I'm not sure what you want." "I have information," Nancy continued, her voice subdued. "About Jennifer, about her whole operation. She used to recruit other women." "What do you mean recruit?" "She'd approach women, wives, girlfriends. She'd get them to come in for auditions, get them to sign membership deals. She was receiving a cut of their earnings, and she bragged about it like she was proud. I quit the club recently, but I feel horrible about some things I knew and kept to myself. I'm willing to share what I know if you need it." My heart thumped. "We can meet." "Name the place." We decided on a modest cafe near downtown, someplace public where we wouldn't feel watched or intimidated. When I arrived, Nancy was already there, sitting at a table near the back. She was dressed simply in jeans and a sweater, her posture tense as though she worried about being recognized. "Thank you for meeting me," she said quietly, motioning for me to sit. I eyed her warily as I eased into the chair opposite. "Why are you doing this?" Nancy sighed. "Truthfully, because I feel guilty. Jennifer lured me into certain activities. I'm not proud of it, but I needed money." At first she acted friendly, guiding me through the process, but as time went on I realized she was enjoying it for more than just the money. She told me she liked the power. She'd whisper that she got a twisted thrill from hooking unsuspecting wives into these gatherings, leading them into new sexual territory and taking a percentage of their fees. And you know what? She told me she found it hilarious how clueless her loving husband was. My jaw clenched. "She bragged about me?" "Bragged might be the wrong word," Nancy said, looking apologetic. "More like she ridiculed you. She said you would never find out because you were too busy playing lawyer, working late, or too naive to suspect your precious wife. When you did find out, she was sure you'd panic and then crawl back to her feet once she threatened you. She also claimed you were an easy mark for manipulation." "Sorry," my blood boiled, but I kept my composure. "I want every piece of evidence you can give me." Nancy nodded. "I have messages between us, screenshots of texts where she actually mentions how she recruits these women. And I can testify to how she was never forced. She was the ringleader, essentially. Also, she was pocketing large sums of money well beyond just a performer's wage. She orchestrated deals. She even bragged about using that money to buy new furniture for the house." I exhaled, my heart hammering. She told me it was some hush-hush TV or film gig. Nancy offered a grim smile. She said that to a lot of people, ironically, but it wasn't just about the money for her. She seemed to enjoy those parties. She liked being the star performer. That was no hidden shame or reluctant sacrifice. She was proud. As Nancy scrolled through her phone, showing me entire conversation threads, images, and even short video clips, my stomach twisted. One video showed Jennifer obviously tipsy, bragging. I told him I was done, but who am I kidding? I can't get enough of these nights. I closed my eyes. The final kernel of hope that maybe Jennifer had only done this out of desperation, the last shred of sympathy, evaporated. Why are you risking yourself telling me all this? I asked Nancy after a long silence. She bit her lip. Because I want out, and I don't want to keep living with these secrets. I'm trying to do the right thing. I also suspect she'll drag my name through the mud if this all goes to court. Let me help you. I'm prepared to make an official statement. I just can't keep quiet anymore. I left that cafe with a burning sense of purpose. Jennifer had done more than cheat. She'd humiliated me, used me, laughed at my ignorance. This wasn't just about a divorce. This was about revenge. I engaged my divorce lawyer, a steely-eyed woman named Barbara, who specialized in high-conflict cases. Barbara was older, sharp, with a no-nonsense manner. When I presented the mountain of evidence, photos, texts, videos, plus Nancy's willingness to testify, Barbara's eyebrows rose. She might attempt to file first, especially if she's as vindictive as you say. We'll be ready. Sure enough, not even a week passed before I was served with formal separation papers and a civil complaint accusing me of spousal abuse, intimidation, and neglect of a child. A child. My head nearly exploded when I saw that. Jennifer's complaint alleged that I had refused support for an 11-year-old daughter, claiming this child was biologically mine, and that I was a deadbeat father. I had never even heard rumors of any child in the entire 9 years we'd been married. Yes, Jennifer was 2 years older than me back in high school, and there was some confusion about her academic year, but I chalked it up to some personal or family reason. Now, everything clicked. She must have dropped out due to pregnancy and returned later, never telling me. She was effectively trying to paint me as not just an abuser, but a father who refused to acknowledge his secret daughter. The entire situation was grotesque and insane. But if I'd learned anything, it was that Jennifer relished insane schemes. I marched into Barbara's office, tossing the complaint on her desk. She's lost her damn mind, I barked. She's claiming I abused her and cheated on her with that friend from the club, Nancy, even though I only met Nancy after the fact. Barbara didn't look particularly shocked. Classic tactic, she muttered. People like your wife often try to stack as many accusations as possible, then they hope something sticks or forces the other party into a settlement. Well, she picked the wrong target, I growled. We're not settling. I want to burn her down in court. Barbara nodded. We'll request an urgent hearing. Let's get this done. The day of the hearing arrived. The tension was thick enough to slice with a knife. The old courtroom building loomed overhead, all columns and arches, with the state flag hanging by the entrance. My stomach roiled with adrenaline and leftover fury. Inside, we took our places. Jennifer walked in, flanked by her mother, a few other family members I recognized from the wedding, and a slim, impeccably dressed male attorney. She shot me a withering glare that held no trace of shame, just defiance. By her side was a young girl, maybe 12, with eyes that indeed resembled Jennifer's. It took effort not to stare, to feel that trickle of shock that maybe Jennifer had actually had this child all along, never telling me, never letting me in on that enormous secret. Once everyone was seated, the judge, a stern-faced woman with short gray hair, entered. We all rose, then sat. Jennifer's lawyer kicked off with a swirling tapestry of accusations. My client has been subjected to repeated domestic abuse, controlling behavior, and in the most shocking turn, an absolute refusal by her husband to support his own child. We have photographic evidence that this man has been consorting with a known associate from an adult club and was seen in a heated altercation in said venue where my client worked to contribute to their mortgage. He forcibly removed her, causing distress and bodily harm. This same man, her husband, changed the locks, leaving her homeless and penniless. We request alimony, child support, and restitution for emotional damages. I sat there, fists clenched. The gall, the brazen rewriting of events. She was effectively painting me as a monster. My turn came. Barbara stood, her voice calm yet forceful. Your Honor, these claims are baseless. We have extensive evidence to prove it. First, my client was entirely unaware of any alleged child. No communication, no proof that this child was recognized as his. Indeed, the mother never informed him during nearly a decade of marriage. We also have documented evidence of who truly inflicted abuse, verbal threats made against my client, culminating in physical harm delivered by employees at the establishment where the defendant works. The defendant has posted on social media about her successful nights, never once indicating fear or intimidation. We request that the court review our exhibits, which demonstrate that Miss Jennifer has, in fact, been continuing her employment, contrary to previous claims of being forced out or financially destitute. That was Barbara's cue to submit the private investigator's photographs, text logs from Nancy, plus images of me after I'd been assaulted by the club's bodyguards. For the final flourish, Barbara gestured to the back of the courtroom where Nancy stood up. A hush fell as Nancy approached the witness stand. Jennifer's face went slack, color draining. She clearly hadn't anticipated Nancy testifying against her. Jennifer's mother looked confused and angry. The attorney rifled through his notes, and the judge motioned for Nancy to speak. In a steady voice, Nancy recounted how Jennifer actively recruited other married women into the club for a percentage of their earnings. How Jennifer told people she had zero intention of quitting because she loved the rush and extra cash. How Jennifer had only begun brandishing accusations of offense once her husband discovered the truth. And how Jennifer boasted about the husband's ignorance and supposedly easy-to-manipulate nature. Nancy also confirmed that I, the husband, had only met her after the pictures were leaked. The photograph of me and Nancy at a cafe was purely for the sake of me gathering details. No affair, no romantic involvement. When Barbara played a short audio clip Nancy had recorded of Jennifer bragging about raking in the money from naive suburban wives, the entire courtroom tensed. Some of Jennifer's relatives gasped in shock, while her attorney glared daggers. Finally, Barbara directed the court's attention to the bank statements obtained through discovery that showed Jennifer's large deposits from the club, clearly indicating she was not left penniless. She had stashed away thousands of dollars. Throughout all this, Jennifer seemed to wilt further into her seat, her bravado disintegrating. Her lawyer stuttered some objections, but the evidence was too solid. The judge demanded an explanation for the secret child, why there was no existing paternity test. No mention of the child in any official capacity for years. Jennifer offered only silence. Her mother tried to say something, but the judge swiftly silenced her. When the judge finally spoke, the tension crackled through the room like a live wire. Having reviewed the evidence and heard the testimony, this court finds that the allegations of domestic abuse are unsubstantiated. Moreover, there is overwhelming documentation of the defendant's substantial undisclosed income. Her claim to alimony is denied. With respect to the alleged child, no evidence has been provided that Mr. Husband is the legal or biological father. If the defendant wishes to pursue that claim, a separate motion and paternity test will be required. But as matters stand, the request for child support here is entirely unfounded. This court grants the divorce. Both parties are henceforth legally separated. I stood there, pulse roaring in my ears, my entire body rigid from the sheer wave of emotion. The final moments dragged, as Jennifer refused to meet my gaze, her face set in a silent mask. The hush in the courtroom felt electric, as if something might yet explode. I caught a glimpse of her mother's expression, outrage, disappointment, a swirl of confusion. The young girl next to them stared at the floor, cheeks flushed. Jennifer's lawyer closed his briefcase with a resigned sigh. The judge rapped the gavel. Court is adjourned. I exhaled a breath I felt I'd been holding for days, weeks, maybe years. My mind buzzed with 1,000 thoughts, ranging from elation to fury to an odd sense of hollow victory. At the periphery of my vision, Jennifer shot me one final look, a strange mixture of contempt, betrayal, and a flicker of fear. For the first time I sensed she knew she had lost, that her illusions had collapsed, that all her threats, manipulations, and secret double life had finally caught up with her. I didn't say a word. I just let the moment hang there, thick and stifling, refusing to break my gaze from hers until she whipped around and stalked away with her family in tow. My heart hammered like a war drum, each beat echoing the vow I had made to myself. I would never again let her or anyone else twist my life into a nightmare. There was no neat epilogue, no sweet sense of closure. The tension roiled in the air, heavy and bitter, as we all filtered out of that courtroom, battle-worn, carrying secrets and resentments that might never be truly resolved. Yet for me, it ended right there in that moment, on that razor's edge of fury and grim satisfaction. The marriage was gone, shredded by her lies and sealed by the judge's decree. And so it concluded on a suffocating hush, with no illusions left to protect us from the bitter truth.